It's just because she is savage.
Throughout the ages of Tamriel, many have debated who is truly the greatest of the Daedric Princes. So I decided to host a lore sports event like no other. I made a bracketed and seeded tournament where we debated and determined which Daedric Prince of the 16 princes from the Elder Scrolls universe is truly the GOAT, the greatest of all time. In this endeavor, I was joined by Avron Doodles from the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages and Lotus of Doom from the Tales of Tamriel podcast and the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. You can find links to their pages and content in the description below. We had a mighty debate. Many Daedric Princes fell. And in this video, we are going to handle the top half of the bracket where we pit princes like G.O.A.T and Azura, Malacath and Clavicus Vile, among many others, to determine who is going to move on to the quarterfinals. Before we get into the debates, if you could take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, it would really help me in my endeavors to make more unique lore content like this. So the way each of the rounds is going to transpire is we have the matchup. We will each kind of discuss which Daedra we think is the best. Not in terms of necessarily physical strength. We can take into any consideration from lore based on impact on Nirn, impact on Tamriel, artifacts that they give to mortals. It can be overall strength. I'll start the first round, but we'll kind of rotate who starts each round voting. So it's not like the last person voting every time. And whichever Daedra gets at least 2 votes is going to move on to the next round.
I enjoy this. I love the setup because I'm also a sports person. So like the fact that we've got like bracket format here is really amusing me.
This is why I went to the length of getting people to vote so I could seed it, because I needed to have it couldn't just be a tournament. It had to be a seeded tournament for me. So
that was just it. Once I noticed you had like seating placements for everything, I was like, oh wow, this is all in.
Best of sports, lore sports.
Yeah.
Lore sports.
This is good.
Now I can be a nerd in 2 categories at once.
Starting with Avron, if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourselves, your qualifications, anything you want to mention before we start.
My qualifications. Oh boy. Hi, I'm Avron, and I think most people know me. I am one of the streamers for UESP, aka the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. I've been involved with UESP for a very long time. It's also our 25th anniversary this year, which is really exciting. And when people think about Elder Scrolls lore, typically they think about us. So I would say, I don't know if that makes me super qualified, because there's definitely things I don't know. However, I have a lot of resources at my fingertips, and I brought in Alfiq for good luck. So honestly, I think, I'm just excited. So I can't wait to talk about nerdy stuff, because that's what I love to do.
Awesome. And Lotus?
I'm Lotus of Doom. I'm from the Tales of Tamriel podcast. I was brought on 3 years ago now, I guess. It's at this point the longest running Elder Scrolls podcast, where it's mostly roundtable discussions and news related stuff. And then the other show that I'm part of is the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, which I wouldn't say necessarily makes me qualified, but it does allow me to research things that I'm interested in so that we can kind of discuss them. I don't consider myself like a lore junkie. I play the games probably an unhealthy amount, but I like the fact that I have to look stuff up in order to discuss it. So I'm one of those people who likes to learn on the go as opposed to just being a font of knowledge, so to speak.
And I am Loctavian, and my qualifications are far less than that. My qualifications are I started playing the Elder Scrolls when I was a kid with Daggerfall and reading every book in the game because I loved reading. And then Morrowind came out and the lore was so different than everything else, I fell in love with it. So basically my qualifications are I'm opinionated and I happen to come up with the idea, so I get a debate. Anything can be a factor. This is very much an opinion-based thing. Round 1, our number 1 seed, G.O.A.T, taking on the number 16 seed, Molag Bal. So for me, without even getting into too much complexity, this is an easy win for G.O.A.T. Molag Bal is Skeletor, is Megatron, is the cackling 80s villain of cartoons. He's big and he's bad and he's angry. He's going to tell you his plan. He's basically going to spell out how to defeat him. And when you do defeat him, he's going to tell you, I'll get you next time. But at the end of the day, he just is mean. He's just angry. And really, I feel like he's the younger brother of the Daedra who wants to prove something and fails at it. Whereas G.O.A.T, my big argument for G.O.A.T progressing is his impact is when all the other Daedra are mad because the Dunmer use the Heart of Lorcan, absorb power, become the Tribunal, living gods, and they can't figure out what to do, how to get the power back. G.O.A.T hucks a meteorite at Vvardenfell, which effectively neuters the power of the most powerful member of the Tribunal, makes G.O.A.T, I think, more successful than anything Molag Bal ever tried. So for me, my vote goes with G.O.A.T.
Yeah, I think this is an easy prediction. It's definitely G.O.A.T. I mean, you have a prince that was literally so powerful that they had to stop his former self to make him into his current self, which is still like considered one of the most powerful and most cunning of Daedra. So even though, you know, he may not be as powerful as he once was, he's still considered so scary that everyone in Tamriel pretty much just respects him out of fear. And if that's not a power move, I don't know what is. Also, shout out because his, you know, he's associated with the Jesters Festival, which is like the coolest holiday in Tamriel. So clearly that's an extra, you know, 5 bonus points. And his like relics, I think, are some of the better known relics in the series. I think everyone who's played any of the games knows what the Wabbajack is and what it does. So I just feel like he is just so well known. And if it's not because of his power, it's just because he's so darn ridiculous. I mean, he's the Daedric Prince of madness, but it's a calculated madness and not a goofy stereotypical madness, which I think just makes him even better. So that's my 2 cents.
I'm not going to buck any trends here. I think, again, G.O.A.T is pretty much like a guarantee. Other than just the popularity vote of him being incredibly well known, Molag Bal does not do much to win much over. It honestly, your description of like just their stereotypical villain is really accurate. And the thing that's funny about it is everything he tries, with the exception of vampirism, kind of has just really right now you're going to play with that, is going to end up kind of falling on it. Like the Soul Burst only does so much. Like it was interesting, but as much as he's threatening, other than the lingering threat or gift, depending upon who, of vampires, which have lingered in Tamriel, everything he does doesn't amount to much. It's just like, yeah, this is me being threatening, this is me being intimidating, and then nothing comes about. And G.O.A.T, I feel, just in a head-to-head fight, if you check out forget which one of, but from the books, the Accounts of Madness, I believe they're called, where G.O.A.T basically has many interactions, one in which going up against Tyrcene, they have a head-to-head battle, and he wins with a bird that tricks Tyrcene's super beast into killing itself. That seems entirely like how this would go down. Molag Bal would bring in everything that he could to flex on everybody, and G.O.A.T would just like put a banana peel at his feet or something completely off the wall and ridiculous, and he'd slip on it and wipe out and like end of fight, and it's embarrassing for everybody involved.
While Molag Bal should get credit for the creation of vampires, I believe vampires, independent of Molag Bal, have done more threatening things in the history of Tamriel.
Also not wrong.
True.
They owe their existence to Bal, but they come up with far more sinister, scary plans.
Yeah, so even his offspring are better than him.
Also, the lore even knows that he has terrible hygiene. I don't know if anyone ever noted that, but it actually says somewhere in lore that he has terrible hygiene and smells of rotting flesh.
Oh.
And if that's not negative votes, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Ugh.
Our next battle is Clavicus Vile taking on Meridia. We'll go ahead and start with Avron on that one.
This is hard because I actually really like Clavicus Vile personally. I think he's a really underrated Daedric Prince. You know, he's kind of like the epitome of be careful what you wish for, right? because his realm is trickery and bargains. And a lot of times you find the things that you want aren't really helpful, or he has a way of kind of like rewarding you that makes it, so that you kind of end up eating your words. Also, he has Barbas. Like, no other Daedric Prince really can say they have a cool sidekick that may or may not be half of them, and that's cool. However, I think Meridia has a better rep lore-wise, not necessarily because she's good. I think, I always argue, people are like, oh, good Daedra. There's very little gray area when it comes to what's good when you're a Daedric Prince, because in the end, they're all about chaos and, just causing conflict. And Meridia is definitely like that. But a lot of the things that she does to kind of cause chaos, sometimes get this reputation as helping mortals. In ESO, right, her whole thing is she's trying to just stop the plane meld. Now, she's not necessarily doing that because she likes us. I think it's more so just because she hates Molag Bal. And she's like, if I can stop you, I win, because that's what I'm all about. So I don't know. I think my vote would go towards Meridia, but only by a little, because I just think she's a little more well known and she's a little more powerful, so to say. However, I really think Vile is underrated. I think Vile is a really strong prince, but he just doesn't get a lot of like good airtime.
So I would actually need to, despite the very valid point of Barbas being awesome, I think this is going to pretty much need to go to Meridia. Like you made reference to, Meridia is oftentimes like considered a good Daedra or helpful, but the issue is we never really know what the situation is, why Meridia's lined up with us in many situations. I mean, obviously the hatred of like undead and stuff like that, but that whole concept of seeming non-threatening, I feel, is it's a rather underrated way of sneaking into more power and people won't notice it. Kind of like if you throw a frog into boiling water, it'll jump out, but if you slowly warm it up, you can boil the frog. She, I feel, keeps getting stronger and stronger through these stories because nobody ever expects Meridia. And I'm still expecting a huge Meridia twist where we've gotten inklings of it in Dungeons and ESO and stuff like that, where she's not this benevolent friend that's like, oh yeah, it's like there's a lot of devious stuff that she's doing. And it's like, well, she did help us here, so we'll just kind of overlook this. Clavicus Vile, there is the benefit of Barbas being just very cool, but there's two major negatives I have. One is real and one is just offensive. The offensive one is his voice actor and his character model in Elder Scrolls Legends Redguard is the worst.
Wow.
It's unbearable. He's squeaky. He's about 8 inches tall and just like shrieks at you riddles. The other like real issue with Clavicus Vile is his reliance on these deals and his trickery backfires on him as much as it helps him. So I feel like if he ends up making some type of deal, Meridia would be much more prone to taking advantage of that and using his own strength against him because it's happened several times before.
I will preface it. Clavicus Vile is my personal favorite Daedric Prince. I love Barbas. Also somebody who has ADHD, the concept that Barbas and him are the same and kind of very split at times, but also the same and help each other appeals to me. Taking out that personal kind of affects, I do agree Meridia is definitely very, very insidious. Meridia is the only one of the Daedric princes who actually left with Magnus when like Lorcan was just thinking, they're like, no, we're out of here. And then was doing insidious like shit there. And they're like, no, you got to get out of here. So she had to go become a Daedric prince because they're like, no, you're too bad for us. Like, we don't like what, Lorcan's doing. We're not going to be part of that. But also you can't be here. And that really signals her not being the greatest, just very opposed to what the other princes are about.
Also,
The
we can't
Umber Sword
forget,
is
a
kind
new
of
man
a
touched
cool-
the beacon.
Oh my lord! Yes, there's always
Had
another
to throw
hand
it in
touching
there.
the beacon.
That brings us to our next top seed, which is our 4th seed, Azura, taking on Malacath.
Both of these are kind of governed by, I guess the best way I could put it is almost like impulsiveness. So Azura needs her followers to love her, and she's got the vanity issue, which is something that can easily be used against you. She was one of the more original ones, if I remember correctly. Malacath, the thing with Malacath is he, again, it doesn't have the vanity aspect so much, but he has the rage aspect. The story goes, just the synopsis, he is tricked into killing his own son, which is, in this case is an orc, just based on the fact that G.O.A.T makes him so angry, he loses track of what he's trying to do. And as a result, it's like, you killed your own. Both of these, it's kind of ironic that these two happen to be matched up because they both have a character flaw that can be pretty easily manipulated. So it makes me wonder which one of these two would be the one to manipulate the other correctly and win something like this. One other thing that I actually might be the thing that turns me over, the Boethia Malacath story of basically Malacath is literal shit at one point, which can't really do much for your image. I feel like that might need to just be brought up. I think this one would actually be very close, as they have more similarities than I thought of until I actually started thinking about both of them. But I think Azura would just barely squeak out a win against Malacath, personally.
On this one, it's not going to be a clean sweep. Azura very much gets so hyper focused on what she's doing that she does get taken advantage of, or things don't go her way. I think Malacath, despite his rage and his character flaws there, also is very oath-bound, very oath-driven, and gets things done and does care for his people, in this case the Orsmer, the orcs, in a lot of ways that other Daedra don't. I think taking into consideration he actually has a lot more people at his kind of beck and call when it comes to mortals in that regards. Obviously not all of the Orsmer because of the Malacath Trinimac debate. My vote's actually going to go with Malacath.
Oh no, that's a lot
Deciding
of pressure.
vote.
I think they're two sides of a very similar coin. Malacath is very loyal to his followers and Azura is very loyal to hers. But Malacath, someone in the chat said it, and I think this is true, Malacath's more about, what you mentioned too, Octavian, oath bringing and loyalty. And Azura, her philosophy is oh, you should love above all else, but it's a very fine line. And I think that kind of twists a lot of her worshipers into looking very devoted, whereas it's really kind of a power thing. However, this is really close, but I personally think Azura squeaks out ahead by a toe. And it's just because she is savage. There's this lore book that has always stood out to me. And it's the story of Azura going to meet some Dwemer philosophers, right? And this one Dwemer philosopher is basically arguing what all the Dwemer argue for, in that, the gods are meaningless, logic and everything above all else. And he challenges Azura and tricks her with a sleight of hand, illusion, just a simple little magic trick.
That's valid.
Right? And she knows, but it makes her look like a fool in front of all the other Dwemer. And she is so mad. She pretty much straight up curses him and he dies. She doesn't even say anything. She just looks at him, disappears, and then he's dead a couple hours later.
I will just always die on Orsmer Hill, so.
Fair. I mean, Malacath is actually awesome.
Oh yeah.
Both of your points are completely valid. I was just I was where do I go? And I'm no, I'm going to die on Orsmer Hill with this one.
That's fair. I've got a hill I'll be dying on at one point, so don't worry about it.
We should rig that and just really get Lotus. It'll make him happy.
I'll be very Azura all of a sudden. Get super spiteful.
The final match of the top half of the bracket is 5th seed Nocturnal versus 12th seed Boethia. Mortals get one over on Nocturnal quite often, whereas Boethia is the prince of plots and has definitely succeeded on a lot more plots, a lot more behind the things, making deals with other Daedra and like allying with them. I think that's just had a ton of impact. I think we've seen that consistently, even in like small ways throughout various games, various eras. So while I don't have as much to say about this one as maybe the other ones, I just couldn't find ways in which I think what Nocturnal does, being from the like the shadows and darkness and what Nocturnal's the prince of, Boethia does it kind of do better.
I'm actually going to go with Nocturnal on this one. And here's why. I mean, I think Boethia, you know, if you want to talk about like strong, savage Daedric Princes, definitely she gets a vote there. And I love like the whole idea where, you know, her worshippers are all about like feats of strength. But I think Nocturnal has a little bit more going on. And here's why I'll say that. There's a really good point that's made in the universe, and it's like you can't really understand her purpose. Like she eludes like mortal understanding, and she is just like the epitome of mystery, you know. And that's kind of like what shadows are, right? They're dark, they're mysterious, you don't know what's happening in them, but something's always happening. And I think like a great case in point, just like talking about the fact she tricks, you know, in some way, shape, or form, right? She pretty much like imprisons Sothasil in his own world, right? And like just pretends to be him for a while. Like that's a power move. I mean, that's impressive for everything that Sothasil can predict to like, you know, perfect computer accuracy. You know, he still kind of falls for that one. She's referred to a lot as Urdra, or one of the, you know, the older forms of Daedric Princes. Not the only one to have that title, but I think that just kind of goes back to saying, you know, she's got a lot going for her. So I'm going to vote for Nocturnal this round.
I'm going to favor Boethia, I think. Less on Boethia and a bit more on some of the issues I have with Nocturnal and how she's crafted. Boethia is pretty savage because the stories involving that are when pledging loyalty, like Boethia is proving, her own people, it devolves into them praying to her. That doesn't get anywhere. So as a result, the one that is granted access just stabs the other one and licks the blood off the knife. And that's the go-to, is to kill your other follower. It's like, wow, that's pretty hardcore. That's like the background, that's what Boethia is looking for. That's pretty intense. So there's definitely a savagery to Boethia in general. The fault I have with Nocturnal, she has a couple scenarios, without spoiling any story stuff from the game. She does kind of occasionally make her mysterious kind of like, oh, you know, what am I doing anyways, known at bits and pieces. So there's definitely some ambition there. However, she almost seems a little klutzy. The reason I say this is her artifacts get stolen a lot, which is weird. The story is of these two thieves in training. It's not actually necessarily a book about Nocturnal, but it's these two thieves in training. And the young thief goes in to steal the cowl of Nocturnal. During that, the master ends up proving his point and betraying her, because when she steps on a branch, Nocturnal about faces on her, and while she basically kills off the apprentice, the master yoinks the cowl and takes off. So she just lost her cowl as well. It seems like she can't keep her old Daedric artifacts for very long, which is, I don't know, I feel like that level of negligence, easily being tricked, it doesn't seem overly difficult to get a one-up on Nocturnal. Not that she's weak, but it's almost like she's too distracted with being mysterious for her own good sometimes, where she misses something and as a result, it hinders her. So I feel like that could be used, especially as somebody as brutal and savage as Boethia, that could be used against her in the grand scheme of things.
Something I just noticed while we were voting on this one that I think is funny is that Azura ended up facing Malacath and Nocturnal ended up facing Boethia, where the natural rivals there would be Boethia and Malacath and Azura and Nocturnal.
That's really funny.
I really hope you enjoyed the top half of our bracket. While it's true the number 1 seed G.O.A.T easily moved on, we did have a big upset today by Boethia. So stay tuned for the next video where we're going to get into the bottom half of the bracket and we see if Daddy Dagon and Hermaeus Mora can hold their top seeds or if we're going to have other exciting upsets. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more Elder Scrolls content, more lore content, please check me out over at twitch.tv/Loctavian at the Loctopus Party. I'm going to see you around next time.